my friends. It's nice to have you with us. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about one of the most fundamental kind of issues associated with this emergence of a new human and where we all seem to be going. People on many occasions have asked me, what is this new human? What is this about? How does this work? And it's encouraged me to think kind of deeply and consistent, and for a long time about the basic kind of idea. And what it was kind of fundamentally about it, as well as what the kind of implications are. The basic idea, of course, is that we are at the verge of an evolutionary jump in the species, and that Homo sapiens are approaching the place in the evolutionary kind of arc where they are going to rise to another level of development, evolution, if you will. And that is, by definition, described and defined in dramatically different ways from the past. Every previous time there's been one of these paradigm shifts, it has been a dramatic, fundamental kind of event. There's a whole series of these things I used to talk about, from single cellular life to multiple cellular life to vertebrates to mammals to, hominids to walking kind of early humans, moving into active agriculture, then to cities and towns, and then it kind of moves into ultimately the industrial era, and then into computers and so on. But in every case, when you go through this transition, the succeeding era is dramatically different than the preceding one. And it starts in relatively simple terms, from single cellular life to multiple cellular life, which of course is relatively simple, more complex, but relatively simple. And then it goes into exceedingly complex, more complex systems. And so what we define here is this exponential curve that when you go back and analyze this thing, you find that there's a 10 times kind of increase at each one of these jumps in terms of kind of the complexity of the whole kind of system that emerges. And the transition times compress as well to become, each generation, each iteration is 1/10 of the one that precedes it. So again, it's almost an exponential transition to an exponential kind of increase in terms of basic kind of capabilities. And it's obvious to see that in terms of technology right now, because you literally have new technologies. Think of it in terms of this, for instance, AI and the ChatGPT and so on, and how amazingly quickly, it's a matter of months, that this ChatGPT shows up and suddenly it just proliferates everywhere. And of course, there are software apps and programs and games that go from nothing to millions of users within a matter of hours now, sometimes. And so you kind of get a sense of the velocity, of the underlying system and what's going on here. But most of that is defined, of course, in terms of technology, which is this driver right now. And when you find yourself kind of defining the dynamics of the environment in technology terms, then you are effectively describing only one of two different evolutionary tracks for the species. And that one, of course, is one going toward technocracy, where a small number of people own and control the very powerful technology that essentially controls everyone else, knows who they are, where they are, what they're thinking, what they eat, controls their funds and money and everything. It's the matrix, essentially, in conventional entertainment terms. It's an environment that is contrived by the technology, but provides very kind of consistent but rudimentary value to the large group of people who are constrained and controlled in that environment. You just remember in the Matrix movie where the guy who is the Judas kind of character in the plot is sitting there eating the steak, saying, "I'm just going to stay right here." He wants to just stay within the matrix, within the artificial environment, because it just feels so good, and that's what they're trying to do. And in his case, it tastes so good. Yeah, and that's the one track. But then we're off on, almost everybody that's listening to this would be in one way or another interested in, if not fully engaged in, headed off in quite a different direction. We can't get there in the short term, by divorcing ourselves from all of the technology. And in a sense, we have to kind of take advantage of it and co-opt it for our use. One of the things we're trying to think about here at the Arlington Institute is how we use artificial intelligence to help build the software that'll allow us to build a global communications and collaboration framework, a platform across the whole planet that will allow millions of people to all actively participate in building literally a model for a new world. You can't do that without very advanced technology, artificial intelligence in this case. And so the issue is, how do you kind of co-opt this stuff that is being used and being influenced by the powers that be, to kind of drive you into this space of kind of 100% control? How do we kind of grab what we can and reprogram it and redirect it toward a new world, and use it, in fact, to accelerate our path toward a new world? And so you can make the case that you can't get to this new world without this new technology. It's reprogrammed, it's repurposed, but you can't just get there without utilizing it. It's a natural kind of a component of the evolutionary process, and it's basically fungible. It works in the same way of money, that you can use it for good or you can use it for bad. You can use it to control people, or in this case, you can use it to enable and to empower people, all of us, on this new track. But you look down that track and you say, so what's that about? And what's the essence of this emergent new human? What's this really about? What's it kind of pivot on? What's it hinge on? Because if you don't kind of get that either explicitly or intuitively, that you really kind of are swimming around, and you don't really quite know exactly where you're going. There are in our space where we all are kind of interested in and operating in, there are a lot of very well-meaning people who are all trying to define different aspects of this path forward. And they all have defined it in kind of their own kind of unique terms, or their own processes, or their own workshops, or their own whatever it turns out to be. But very few have kind of distilled this down to the essence of what this major shift is all about in human terms, in terms of who we all are. I would suggest to you that it's relatively simple, although very kind of deeply important and profound. And it's not the fact that it's simple doesn't mean that it's necessarily easy, but the idea is relatively simple. And that is that the notion is that what we're trying to do here is get back to if you wanted something to hang your hat on in terms of this kind of discussion, what we're trying to do is get back to a fundamental kind of connection with and engagement with nature. Let me talk to you a little bit about what that's about, what that means. In a sense, if you again look at the arc of human development, what you started with is what still existing indigenous groups like those in Aboriginals in Australia and other places, or even some in the United States. And certainly, but I mean, the Carlos Castaneda kind of series about Don Juan and so on is a wonderful example of it. And that is that these native groups, these indigenous groups, had this extraordinary, wasn't just a connection, it was an integration with nature. And they were fully integrated in the whole kind of full spectrum of the energies and communications and things. I mean, there's all kinds of these stories, of course, about the Aboriginals being able to communicate in hundreds of miles away to people just to their other people in their tribes, because they can just think in those, that they can communicate, they can get into that space and communicate there. There are all kinds of stories about the Native Americans and other Aboriginal groups who would literally, when they were out hunting, would communicate and call to a deer and engage a deer that would come up and literally sacrifice itself to be harvested to be able to supply the nutrition that the hunter needed to take back to his group. And so there was this synergy that existed in very kind of practical terms and in much broader kind of terms. When you think about some of what archaeologists and others are discovering about how some of these groups had this relationship with the stars and with astronomy and ultimately astrology, That is a really different kind of twist and a difference from where we live today. If you think about it a little bit, it's you can, I mean, you could make the case that if you didn't have any electricity, you didn't have any lights, and the stars were the only thing you had to look at night, and so you, of course, you'd be interested in all of that. Well, it was a little bit more than that, I think. I mean, it certainly was that, but there was this unencumbered engagement with the broader spectrum of reality and the energetic elements of that. And we call it nature. And what has happened in the last couple of centuries, at least 3 centuries perhaps, is or probably more than that, but I mean it was clearly kind of accelerating going through the last 3 or 4 centuries, is that this movement away from not only philosophically but also in practical kind of terms with the engagement. It's not just engagement, it's kind of this integral connection with the larger spectrum of reality. It's as though we extracted ourselves, we untethered ourselves from these kind of fundamental kind of ideas about how the energetics and the larger reality and the spiritual aspects of it and so on, and the fact that we were an integral part of this large kind of ecosystem. You didn't call it that back then, but that was the idea, that you were did not operate independently from all of this. You were really part of an integral part of the whole thing. I'm reminded of how the early in the 1860s and such, there was this clash between the white guys coming out of the East, who had extracted themselves from the connections from this more fundamental reality, and then they were competing with and fighting with the American Indians. And if you want a kind of a classic example of the discontinuity between the two, is that during the 1860s and 70s and later, a little bit later during that century, you had these buffalo hunters that went out, and they'd come out with the trains, because the trains first came out in the 1860s or so into the plains and across the country. And these guys would literally set up in a kind of an industrial way. They would kill buffalo like thousands a day. They set up a guy with a rifle on a tripod, and he'd just sit there and pick them off. And he had all this kind of crew, half a dozen guys who were running out there and skin them, and all they wanted was the skin, so that they could take them back and do hats and coats and things for the wealthy people on the East Coast. And what they were doing, of course, is destroying the whole ecosystem, the whole support system for the native groups, which operated on a wholly different kind of integrated kind of way, where all of these other parts of the environment were all functioning in kind of synergy to help support each other and so on. And so you you saw this kind of this wave of these folks coming out from the east and that was before, of course, they were right at the beginning of the industrial age, and then you got into steam engines and all, and oil wells and whatever, and cars and airplanes, and all of that just effectively divorced all but a very few from the essential kind of character and energy and the animating force of this planet. And it's another discussion that we won't spend time on here, but to question why did that happen and what kind of made that kind of turn like that. Maybe it's kind of a natural kind of process in the evolutionary process of a species of people on planets that they somehow need to somehow get engaged with, and with technology. But that's if you listen to Rudolf Steiner and you read Rudolf Steiner, he argued early in the 20th century that this whole business of electricity was antithetical to the essence of who we are and to the future of humanity. And but he saw it in these deep kind of spiritual and esoteric kind of terms. It's not clear to me whether he was just talking about it in just structural kind of energetic terms, or whether he was anticipating and looking downstream at what the ultimate kind of manifestation implications of electricity was going to be. But in any case, he made a very strong case that that what electricity was doing was essentially kind of tearing people away from that connection to the earth and to humanity, into to the natural world that had described who we were and particularly where we came from and who we were at the most fundamental terms. And so we're full blown into the flowering of the extraordinary implications of electrical kinds of things that have now jumped far beyond just light and automobiles and whatever, to where it is now literally shaping the essence of the environment and the reality in which we live, and forcing us to question the essence of what that is. Which sounds like, to me, a kind of a natural kind of place to start to say, so what is this about? And what is it happening? And what are we trying to learn from this? Or where is it trying to drive us? Or what are we supposed to find out from this? Because what you can see is this simple and obvious kind of track, I'd call it dystopian track, that's going toward full spectrum control by those on the technology side of this thing, bots in your brain, and ideas inserted into your mind from satellites in the air and so on. I mean, it's the antithesis of kind of being connected to nature and being a part of that. And so if you then look over onto this evolutionary track that's going into this new space, you say, what is that about? How does that differ in really fundamental terms from this technology defined kind of, well, of option. And I would suggest that if you want a rather easy to understand way to describe it, what's this new track toward personal development and spiritual engagement and, you know, DNA out and engage, uh, engagement and by energy from the center of the galaxy and so on, activation. That what you're looking at is essentially a move back in different terms, admittedly, but a move back toward this engagement with nature. Nature defined in this case as this more broadly understood fabric of what animates the reality that we live in. It's not as abstract. It is as abstract as that, but it's not only as abstract as that, because in very practical terms, that this is as close as going outside here and looking at and engaging with the trees and the plants and the animals and appreciating that we are an integral part of this larger system. We have a different function than a lot of the other things, the other component parts, but they're all play a very, an integral and an important part, a contributing part. I mean, if they weren't there, if trees weren't there, if I was over at a friend's house today and he took me out and back and showed me his goats. He said 4 goats. Goats are so sweet and they're so kind and they're like little puppies. And, you sit there and you say, this is good, in some really fundamental way, this is good. And he had, chickens. He had a rooster, a beautiful rooster, and they were all running around, kind of pecking away, picking up stuff on the ground as they do. And you just look at all of that and you say, this is good. I mean, this is really, there's something kind of sweet and internally kind of engaging and consistent about how this all kind of works, which really flies in the face of American politics, for instance, or any of the other kind of things that humans generate in the way that they engage and activate and work within themselves over on this kind of technology side of the equation. There's just a really sweet, kind, almost cooperative, loving kind of place over in here that is that actively engages with this kind of broad, kind of ubiquitous reality that we're surrounded with, but we often don't think about it in those kinds of terms. I went out last night. I usually work till about 10 or 11 at night, and my office is a few steps away from our house, and so I walk outside to get over there. And I walked out last night, and the sky was marvelous. It was clear, and the stars were all over the thing, and there was just kind of just a sense of giant and kind of engagement, and that's, and you don't get that watching TV. You just don't pick that up going to the movies or a football game or some other kind of thing. It was really, really majestic in the way and the essence of what it all is. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make is that there is this at the center of all of this, that this evolutionary jump, this raising consciousness, this expanded awareness, that the basis of it all is this kind of emboldened, broadened kind of reality, engagement with and understanding of the fundamental kind of aspects of what it animates this reality, and it is all around us in terms of the nature and all the plants and animals and such, and how that all works. This is not an argument for returning to prehistoric times or anything like that, but it's about balancing, right? It's about marrying the advanced understanding that we have in terms of science and technologies and other kinds of things, and maintaining a balance on the other side with this ongoing, never-ending kind of connection with the more fundamental kind of animating aspect of what this reality is, which out here in West Virginia we call nature. And so it's really fun, and I am blessed to live in the rural area in the mountains and surrounded by woods, and so I see it all the time. But wherever one lives, wherever you live, it's there. And I think finding that is, and embracing it, communicating with it, is an essential aspect of beginning to see the world in a quite different new way. So thank you.